The first sign that my marriage was over came from a woman in a navy blazer sliding a stack of papers away from me like they'd suddenly become dangerous. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. The wire never cleared. For a second, I thought she was talking to somebody else. The conference room at Franklin Title in Columbus, Ohio, smelled like burnt coffee and copier toner. My daughter, Sophie, sat in the corner with a marker set and a page that said "Welcome Home" in bubble letters she'd decorated with little yellow suns. Through the window behind the closing agent, I could see the narrow brick townhouse we were supposed to move into that weekend. It had a tiny fenced yard, a maple tree out front, and a second-floor bedroom Sophie had already claimed as the one with the best light. "What do you mean it didn't clear?" I asked. The loan officer didn't look me in the eye. He looked at his keyboard. "The funds were withdrawn from the account yesterday morning." I laughed once. Not because anything was funny. Because my brain rejected the sentence so fast it had nowhere else to go. "That's not possible." Sophie looked up from her coloring page. "Mom?" The closing agent folded her hands. "Mrs. Bennett, the balance needed for closing was no longer available when we verified this morning." I grabbed my phone and called my husband. Straight to voicemail. I called again. This time he answered, but not before I heard a voice in the background, his mother's voice, low and sharp and much too close to the phone. "Don't answer her like that," Lorraine hissed. "You'll just make it worse." Then Daniel said, "Nora, I can explain." My whole body went cold. "You better explain right now," I said, standing so fast my chair scraped against the floor. "Where is our money?" There was silence on the line. Not confusion. Not surprise. Silence, the kind that already knows the damage is done. Sophie stared at me from the corner, her little face going pale. And in that ugly, hollow second, while a stranger's office blurred around me and my daughter sat beside a poster that said "Welcome Home" to a house we no longer had, I realized three things at once. My husband knew exactly where the money was. His mother knew too. And whatever lie he was about to tell me had probably started long before today. If you're enjoying stories about real-life challenges, personal growth, and unforgettable life lessons, consider subscribing to the channel. New stories are released regularly, and you won't want to miss the next one. My name is Nora Bennett. I was 38 years old that spring, a pediatric occupational therapist at a rehab clinic on the northwest side of Columbus, the kind of place with tiny sensory gyms and walls covered in finger paintings and progress charts. I spent my days helping children learn how to button shirts, hold pencils, calm their nervous systems, and believe they could do hard things. I was good at my job. Patient. Steady. The person other people handed chaos to because they trusted I could sort it. At home, I thought I'd built a life that matched that same steady rhythm. Daniel was 41, an operations manager for a regional shipping company. He was reliable on paper, good with numbers, never flashy, never reckless in the ways people usually mean when they warn you about bad husbands. He didn't drink too much. He didn't disappear for nights. He remembered birthdays. He coached Sophie's rec soccer team even though he hated the heat and packed her lunches with little notes that said things like "Go be brave." We'd been married 12 years. We had one daughter, one used Honda, one overstuffed rental with creaky floors, and a joint savings account that had taken us 7 years to build. It wasn't luxury money. It was life money. House money. Emergency money. Braces money. College money. It was overtime shifts, canceled vacations, side gigs, skipped furniture purchases, and every tax refund going straight into a future we said we wanted together. And now it was gone. I stepped out of the conference room because I refused to let Sophie hear what came next. "Tell me exactly what you did," I said into the phone. Daniel exhaled like I was the one cornering him unfairly. My mom needed help. With $82,000? It wasn't all at once. I leaned against the hallway wall so hard the frame rattled. "You moved our savings without telling me?" "Nora, listen to me," she was in trouble. So you stole from your wife? His voice sharpened. Don't call it that. What would you like me to call it, Daniel? A surprise? He went quiet again, and I heard Lorraine in the background saying something I couldn't make out. The fact that she was there, present, involved, listening, hit me almost harder than the money itself. How long? I asked. Another pause. 9 weeks, he said. I closed my eyes. That meant he had kissed me goodbye in the mornings, watched me compare mortgage rates at night, sat through paint color conversations and school district maps and lender calls, all while knowing the money was already disappearing. You looked me in the face, I whispered. Every single day. I was going to put it back. With what? He didn't answer. The closing agent came to the hallway and gave me a look I still remember, a mix of professional sympathy and the relief of a stranger who gets to step away from your life when her shift ends. Mrs. Bennett, she said softly, the sellers are willing to grant a 24-hour extension if the funds can be restored. I nodded without hearing her. Nora, Daniel said, please come home and let me explain. I looked through the glass into that conference room and saw Sophie holding up the page she'd colored, still waiting for me to smile and tell her something was okay. No, I said. You come here. Right now. By the time Daniel arrived, 90 minutes later, the sellers had revoked the extension. Another offer had come in. Cash. Clean. Fast. Ours was dead. Sophie fell asleep in the back seat on the drive home, exhausted from a day that started with pancakes and ended with adults speaking in the careful voices people use around funerals. Daniel followed my car into the driveway of our rental and got out looking like a man who'd spent the last hour practicing innocence. He was still wearing the blue dress shirt I'd ironed for closing. He still had the tie Sophie picked out because it had tiny gray stripes and she said it made him look housebuyy. And that made me hate him for a moment, so pure and sharp it scared me. I told Sophie to go inside and turn on her show. She glanced from me to her father, sensing the weather. Am I in trouble? She asked. No, baby, I said, because my voice still worked for her if for no one else. Go inside. She nodded and slipped past us. Daniel stepped toward me. Nora. I held up my hand. Don't you dare start with my name like it's going to calm me down. Start with the truth. He dragged a hand over his mouth. My mom was behind on payments. On what? Her house. Why? She got hit with medical bills after Dad died and then property taxes came due and she was going to lose it. Your father died 2 years ago. It all caught up with her. So you gave her everything. He winced. It was supposed to be temporary. How much? He named the number and it was worse than what I'd imagined. $86,412. Not nearly all our savings. All of it. And then some from the account we'd set aside for Sophie's summer program. I laughed again, this time because the alternative was slapping him. You took our daughter's money too. It was all in the same place. No, I stepped closer. Don't you clean this up with technical language. You took from our child. He lowered his voice. I knew you'd say no. That sentence changed everything. Not because I was surprised. Because he said it like it justified him. I knew you'd say no. There it was. The confession inside the excuse. He didn't forget to tell me. He didn't run out of time. He chose secrecy because partnership was inconvenient. I stared at the man I'd built a life with and felt something inside me shift out of place. Why would I say no? I asked. Because you and my mom don't get along. That is not an answer. He swallowed. Because you think she's dramatic. She is dramatic. She's my mother. And I was your wife this morning. The screen door opened behind us and then clicked shut again. Sophie wasn't on the porch, but she was close enough to hear if we got louder, so I forced my voice back down. Did Lorraine ask you not to tell me? Daniel said nothing. Did she? She didn't want you to panic. I actually stepped back, as if distance might help me survive the level of stupidity standing in front of me. Oh, that's rich. She was embarrassed, Nora. Embarrassed enough to take my child's stability? She would have lost her home. And we just lost ours. The thing was, we had not been buying some sprawling dream property with a pool and a 6-car garage. We were buying normal. Necessary. Our landlord had already informed us he planned to sell the rental by summer. We had 60 days to move. The townhouse on Alder Street wasn't glamorous, but it was ours, or would have been. It was the first real proof that all the sacrifice had meant something. Daniel knew that. He knew about the spreadsheet on the fridge with move-in dates. He knew about the school zoning map. He knew about Sophie counting the steps to her room. He knew, and he did it anyway. I'm going to take a shower, he said, like maybe if he gave me a minute I'd become reasonable again. Then we can sit down and figure out next steps. I looked at him in disbelief. You think you're going to shower in this house? He frowned. I live here. I walked past him, went inside, grabbed a duffel bag from the hall closet, and came back out. I handed it to him. Go stay with your mother. Nora. You seem more married to her than me, so go. His face hardened. Don't do that. Do what? Notice the obvious? This is my house too. For now. I pointed at the bag. Leave. He stood there a few seconds longer, deciding whether this was the moment to push. Then something in my face must have told him not to. He took the bag and went. I locked the door behind him and leaned both hands against it until the wood stopped shaking under my palms. Then I went into the living room, sat beside my daughter, and let her small warm body curl against mine while cartoon voices filled the space where my marriage used to be. That night, after Sophie went to bed, I opened every bank statement from the past 3 months. The first transfer had been $12,000. Then 15. Then 9. Then 28. Then another 10. There were memos beside some of them: loan, emergency, family. One even said, temporary. Like naming betrayal makes it less ugly. At 1 a.m, I called my best friend, Tasha. She answered on the second ring. What happened? I don't know how she knew something had. Maybe because women like Tasha always know when silence is wrong. Maybe because I never called that late unless something was on fire. I told her everything. When I finished, she was quiet for 2 seconds and then said, "You need copies of everything. Statements, screenshots, mortgage documents, text messages. Email them to yourself and to me." Tasha. I'm serious. Right now. And tomorrow, you call a lawyer. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark and stared at the baby monitor we still used even though Sophie was 9, because anxiety doesn't always retire when kids stop waking at night. I don't even know what I'm doing, I whispered. Yes, you do, she said. You're surviving the thing he caused. That first week after the closing disaster felt like being trapped in a hallway where every door led to a new humiliation. The sellers kept our earnest money. Our landlord moved up the showing schedule because, in his words, the spring market is hot. The clinic where I worked announced that the director position I'd quietly hoped to be considered for would require additional evening meetings over the next 2 months, exactly when my personal life turned into a second full-time job. And Daniel kept texting me like this was a difficult patch rather than a controlled demolition. I'm sorry. Can we talk? You're making this harder than it has to be. That last one sat on my screen so long my thumb nearly cracked the glass. I did talk to him, twice. Once on the phone and once in person at a coffee shop because I refused to have another emotional explosion in front of Sophie. He stuck to the same basic script. Lorraine had been panicking. The tax notice was final. He thought he could replace the money with a year-end bonus and a refinance. He didn't want to burden me while I was stressed about the move and work. In other words, he didn't trust me to be an equal adult in my own life. What exactly was the tax notice? I asked at the coffee shop. He blinked. What? The paperwork. The amount. The deadline. He looked down at his cup. I didn't read every page. You transferred almost $90,000 and you didn't read every page? He started getting irritated then, which was the first honest emotion I'd seen from him since the truth came out. You're acting like I had some malicious plan. No. I'm acting like you lit our future on fire because your mother cried. That's not fair. I leaned across the table. Do you know what isn't fair? Telling a little girl she's finally getting the room she's dreamed about and then explaining that Daddy sent the money to Grandma behind Mommy's back. He flinched. You told Sophie? She deserved the truth in an age-appropriate way. More than I got. He scrubbed both hands over his face. I'm trying, Nora. No. You're managing fallout. There was a difference, and I could see in his expression that he hated I knew it. 2 days later, Lorraine called me directly. I almost let it ring out, but some part of me wanted to hear the voice of the woman who had reached into my family and taken what she wanted. Nora, she said, in that church lady voice that always sounded like concern wrapped around criticism. I've been preying on this situation. I laughed so hard I had to pull the phone away from my ear. I'm not sure prayer covers theft, Lorraine. You don't need to be disrespectful. You don't need my money. A beat of silence. Then, Daniel made a decision to help his family. I was his family. You still are, if you stop being so proud. That one landed. Not because it hurt. Because it told me exactly how she saw the world. In Lorraine's mind, any boundary that inconvenienced her became pride, selfishness, coldness, modern nonsense. My daughter lost her home because of you, I said. Lorraine sighed dramatically. No, sweetheart. Your daughter lost a house closing. Let's not be theatrical. My grip tightened on the phone. I'm going to say this once. You will pay back every dollar you took from our family. I didn't take anything. Daniel offered. It was such a slick little shift of blame that for a second I almost admired it. Then let me be clear, I said. If you don't return the money, I will use every legal option available to me. Her tone cooled. You want to drag family into court? You dragged family into a bank. She hung up on me. That weekend, Tasha came over with takeout, a bottle of wine neither of us opened because I needed a clear head, and a banker's box full of hanging folders. We sat on my living room floor while Sophie watched a movie in her room, and Tasha helped me sort 12 years of marriage into categories. Assets. Debts. Mortgage documents. Taxes. Insurance. Retirement. School records. At some point she held up a statement and said, Nora. What? There's another account transfer here. I leaned over. It wasn't one of the big wire payments. It was smaller. $3,000, then $2,500, then $1,800. Regular. Quiet. Repeating. To Lorraine, I said. No, Tasha pointed. This one's to something called LMW Holdings. What is that? I don't know. A cold thread slid through me. Daniel didn't mention that. Of course he didn't. I wrote it down. The next morning, while Sophie was at a birthday party, I searched the Ohio Business Registry. LMW Holdings was a limited liability company registered 11 months earlier. Owner, Lorraine M. Walsh. Lorraine had used her maiden name. The registered address was not her house. It was a small office suite in Dublin, one suburb over. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. If she was so desperate to save her home, why had she formed a company in secret? Why was Daniel sending money to that entity as well as directly to her personal account? Why hadn't either of them mentioned it? I took screenshots and sent them to Tasha and to myself. Then I called Elise Moreno, an attorney I'd known from college who now handled family law and financial disputes. "I need a consult," I said when she picked up. Her tone turned serious immediately. "Are you safe?" "Yes." "Is your child safe?" "Yes." "Okay. Then come tomorrow morning and bring everything." Elisa's office sat above a bakery near German Village, and the irony of discussing my collapsing marriage while cinnamon rolls baked downstairs wasn't lost on me. She was the same as I remembered: sharp eyes, efficient posture, dark curls pinned back, the kind of woman who could make you feel both comforted and cross-examined in the same 5 minutes. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands. "First, I'm sorry. Second, this is financial misconduct inside a marriage, and depending on the account setup, potentially more. Third, do not tip him off to everything you know yet." "I already told him I talked to a lawyer." "That's fine. Don't tell him about the LLC until we understand what it is." I nodded. She slid a notepad toward me. "What do you want?" The question caught me off guard. "I want my money back." "That's one thing. What else?" I looked at the bakery window across the street, at people carrying coffee and paper bags as if regular life still existed. "I want my daughter to feel safe again." Elise nodded once. "That's clearer." I swallowed. "And I want to know whether my husband has been lying to me about more than this." "Good," she said. "Now we're getting somewhere." She explained practical things. "Document everything. No verbal agreements. No moving assets impulsively. No screaming texts that could end up on a judge's desk. If I needed to separate physically, do it carefully. If Daniel continued draining money, we could seek temporary orders." Then she said, "I can subpoena records if needed, but before we go nuclear, let's see what voluntary disclosure looks like." "Daniel won't voluntarily disclose anything." "Then let him prove that." On my way back to the clinic, Daniel called. I ignored it. He called again. Then texted, "Mom says you threatened her." I pulled into the staff parking lot and stared at the message until anger gave way to something colder. Not regret. Recognition. He had gone straight from our marriage to his mother with every detail. There was no private space between us anymore. No room where husband and wife still existed independent of Lorraine's influence. I typed back, "I told her to return what she took." He answered immediately. "She didn't take it." "I gave it." I wrote, "without my consent." His reply took longer. Then, I was trying to prevent a crisis. I almost didn't respond, but I wanted it in writing. "And you created one." That evening, Sophie asked the question I'd been dreading. "Are you and Dad getting divorced?" She was sitting at the kitchen island eating apple slices, her dark blonde hair still damp from her bath. Children will break your heart with the calmness of how they say things. I set down the dish towel. "Why would you ask that?" She shrugged without looking up. "Because Grandma Lorraine told Dad some wives don't understand sacrifice. And then Dad cried in the driveway yesterday after he thought I went inside. And Ms. Tasha hugged you for a really long time." I sat beside her. "None of this is your fault," I said. "I know." She looked at me then. "But that's not the same as not happening. There are moments when your child says something so honest it feels like being stripped bare in front of yourself." "No," I said softly. "It's not." She pushed an apple slice around her plate. "Did Dad lie?" I considered lying for him. Smoothing it out. Protecting her from complexity. Then I thought of the bubble letter welcome home poster in the title office and the way betrayal enters a child's body even when nobody uses the word. "Yes," I said. "Dad made a very serious choice without telling me. And now we're figuring out what happens next." She was quiet a long time. Then, "Does Grandma hate you?" I felt my throat tighten. No, baby. I think Grandma believes she deserves things that belong to other people. Sophie nodded like that made a weird kind of sense. The next week brought the first real crack in Daniel's version of events. Elise had advised me to request documentation formally before filing anything major, so I sent Daniel a simple email. Please provide all records related to funds transferred from our joint savings account, including notices, tax documents, loan agreements, and correspondence related to Lorraine's housing emergency. He responded with 3 attachments. None of them were an official foreclosure notice. One was a county tax delinquency statement for Lorraine's address, late, yes, but nowhere near foreclosure. One was a hospital balance summary for $2,100. The third was a handwritten list of upcoming obligations on notebook paper that might as well have been titled "Trust Me Bro." I printed them and drove to Lorraine's neighborhood after work. Not to confront her. Not yet. Just to look. Her lawn was freshly edged. There was a new porch set out front, still with retail tags tucked under one chair. Parked in the driveway was a silver crossover SUV I had never seen before. I sat in my car gripping the steering wheel so hard my shoulders locked. If she was weeks away from losing her home, why was she buying patio furniture? Why was there a newer car in the driveway than the one I drove my child in every day? My phone buzzed. Tasha, did he send docs? I sent her pictures. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally she wrote, Nora, this is not an emergency. This is a story. She was right. And stories are built out of omissions. The next omission came from Daniel's sister, Kayla. Kayla Bennett was 33, beautiful in a fragile way, and the family's permanent storm system. She wasn't evil. She wasn't lazy. She was the kind of person who always seemed to be one bad month away from starting over again. A recovering addict with a son in middle school, a rotating list of jobs, and a talent for making everybody else feel cruel if they asked a direct question. She showed up at my clinic on a Thursday afternoon unannounced. My receptionist buzzed me. There's a Kayla Bennett here to see you. Says it's family. I almost said no. Then I thought better of it. She stood in the lobby wringing a denim jacket between her fingers. No makeup. Hair in a messy bun. Eyes already red. I only need 5 minutes, she said. We stepped into a small consultation room. Did Lorraine send you? I asked. She shook her head. No. Daniel doesn't know I'm here. That got my attention. Kayla sat down and burst into tears so abruptly it almost looked rehearsed. But then she started talking in those broken, embarrassed starts people do when the truth has been trapped in them too long. I didn't know it was all your savings, she said. I swear to God, Nora, I didn't know. I stayed standing. What did you know? She covered her face. Mom said Daniel was helping her with the house and helping me get caught up. Caught up on what? My restitution. The room went completely still. I stared at her. What restitution? Kayla lowered her hands. From the dental office. I had to think for a second. The job you lost last year? She nodded. They said you left for better hours. Her mouth twisted. Mom said that sounded better. I sat down slowly. Kayla told me everything in pieces. After a relapse scare last year, she'd started taking small amounts of cash and gift cards from the office where she worked the front desk. She got caught. Because it was her first charge and because the owner had known the family for years, they'd agreed not to pursue felony theft if she paid back the money under a civil settlement and completed treatment. Lorraine found out and panicked. Daniel found out later. The amount had ballooned with legal fees and deadlines. How much? I asked. Kayla whispered the number. $31,000. I felt sick. Daniel knew? She nodded, crying harder. Mom made him promise not to tell you because you'd think I was trash. I closed my eyes. This was it, then. The first ugly layer underneath the lie. Not one crisis. Several. Not one transfer. A web of them. But it still didn't explain the LLC. It didn't explain the full amount. It didn't explain the tax story. How much of our money went to you? I asked. Kayla's shoulders crumpled. I don't know exactly. Mom handled it. She said Daniel understood. I leaned back, stunned by how casually everybody in that family used the word understood to mean endure without consent. Why are you telling me this now? Because my mom said if you filed anything, she'd say you knew. She said there's no proof you didn't. And then I realized, Kayla looked up at me, shame all over her face. I realized she was willing to lie about you too. I believed her. Not because Kayla was reliable. Because unreliable people are often excellent weather vanes for the bigger manipulator in the room. Does Daniel know there was more than the restitution? I asked. She hesitated. What more? Kayla twisted the jacket harder. Mom opened that company because she wanted to buy the office condo next to her church. She said it was a smart investment. She kept talking about passive income and finally having something in her own name. My blood went cold. How much did he give her for that? I don't know if he knew it was for that, Kayla whispered. He thought he was helping with debt and back taxes. But Mom moved things around. There it was. The floor under the whole story gave way. Lorraine had taken my family's savings under the cover of emergency and used at least part of it to invest in property. Not survive. Advance. I thanked Kayla, though the words tasted bitter, then called Elise from my car. When I finished explaining, she was silent for a long beat. Okay, she said. Now we stop being patient. What does that mean? It means we file for temporary financial restraining orders and compel disclosure. It means your husband either admits he was deceived, or we establish he participated in deceiving you. I rested my forehead against the steering wheel. I can't believe this is my life. Yes, you can, she said gently. That's why it hurts. That night I asked Daniel to meet me at the house after Sophie went to a sleepover at Tasha's. He arrived looking wary, like maybe he sensed the tone had changed. I laid the documents out on the kitchen table. Bank statements. Business registry screenshots. The fake emergency paperwork. Notes from Kayla's confession. He looked at the LLC paperwork and his face drained of color. What is this? I asked. He stared at the page too long before answering. I don't know. Try again. He sat down slowly. It's my mom's company. What company? She said she might start consulting for church administration and property management after Dad died. She wanted a legal structure. Did you send our savings to it? His silence answered first. Daniel. Yes, he said finally. Some of it. How much? He rubbed both hands over his knees. I don't remember exactly. I slammed the table so hard the pens in the mug rattled. Stop saying that. Stop pretending memory is your problem when morality is. He flinched. Did you know about Kayla's restitution? Yes. Did you tell me? No. Did you know your mother was buying property? No, he looked up fast. Nora, I swear to you, I did not know that. I studied him. There are lies that puff themselves up too quickly, and there are truths that show up late and broken because even admitting them is humiliating. What I saw in him then looked like the second kind. But it didn't save him. Whether she lied to you is not the point, I said. You lied to me. His eyes filled. I was trying to fix everything. No. You were trying to be the son she trained you to be. He said nothing. I hadn't planned to tell him what Kayla revealed, but I did. I watched each piece hit him. The restitution. The business. The property rumor. By the end, he looked like somebody had peeled his skin off. She told me the tax notice was final, he whispered. And you believed her over me without even checking. She said if I told you, you'd make me choose. I let out a humorless breath. And what did you think hiding it was? He covered his face. I know. No, I said softly. You know now because it cost you something. That landed. For the first time since this started, Daniel looked not defensive or irritated or guilty in a vague, self-protective way. He looked wrecked. Can we fix this? He asked. I stared at him for a very long time. I don't know, I said. But you're not going to decide that by crying in my kitchen after I find out your mother built a secret company with my future. The legal process started the following Monday. Elise filed motions freezing further movement from joint funds and requiring disclosure of assets, transfers, and related entities. It wasn't a full divorce filing yet, but it was close enough that everyone understood where this was headed. Daniel called 23 times in 2 days. Lorraine left me one voicemail accusing me of trying to destroy a grieving widow. That phrase almost impressed me. She had a Hallmark card talent for rearranging victimhood until it looked holy. Then she showed up at my house in person. I was in the driveway loading Sophie's overnight bag for a weekend at my cousin's place while the landlord's agent held an open house inside. Because yes, that was my life now, strangers evaluating kitchen storage while my marriage bled out in public. Lorraine stepped out of her SUV in a cream cardigan and pearls, carrying a covered casserole dish like this was a church visit and not an ambush. Oh, absolutely not, Tasha muttered from the porch. She had come over to help and was still holding a roll of packing tape. Lorraine smiled too brightly. I thought we could have a conversation like adults. We can, I said. Adults call first. Sophie froze near the car. Hi, sweetheart, Lorraine said to her. Grandma brought chicken tetrazzini. Sophie looked at me. Not at the casserole. Me. Asking who was safe. That look did something permanent to my heart. Go wait inside with Tasha, I told her. Once she was gone, I faced Lorraine in the driveway. Return the money. She sighed. Nora, you're being emotional. Return the money. I don't have liquid access to all of it right now. There it was. The first real admission. Because you used it. It's tied up. In what? Her lips thinned. An investment. I laughed once, sharply. You mean the office condo? Her eyes widened just enough. I don't know what lies Kayla's been telling. Stop. Just stop. You took money from your son's child to make an investment. It was not like that. What was it like? She drew herself up. It was like finally choosing not to be powerless. For a second, I didn't speak. Because beneath the manipulation, there was a human thing there. A desperate, grasping truth. Lorraine had spent most of her life depending on men, her late husband, then her son, then the idea of family obligation. She was terrified of aging with nothing fully hers. I could almost pity that. Almost. You had choices, I said. You could have told the truth. You could have asked. You could have sold your house, downsized, taken a job, cashed in your own assets. Tears sprang to her eyes so fast it felt theatrical. At my age? After everything I've done for this family? Your son is blowing up his marriage because you taught him guilt was love. Her face changed then. The softness vanished. No, darling. Your marriage is blowing up because you think being right matters more than standing by your husband. I stepped closer. My husband stood somewhere else. She set the casserole dish on the hood of her SUV with a little thump. You always thought you were better than us. I almost answered, then realized it didn't matter. Lorraine needed me arrogant so she could stay innocent. Any further communication goes through my attorney, I said. She shook her head with genuine disgust. Lawyers. Courts. Records. Your generation can't survive anything uncomfortable without turning family into paperwork. I looked her dead in the eye. Women of your generation called financial abuse sacrifice and expected applause for surviving it. I'm not passing that down to my daughter. For once, Lorraine had nothing ready. She got in her SUV and drove away, leaving the casserole on the hood. Tasha picked it up with 2 fingers like it was radioactive and dumped it straight into the trash. By early summer, the truth came in hard, ugly pieces. Through disclosures and records, Elise established that Daniel had transferred $86,000 out of our accounts over 10 weeks. $31,000 and change went toward Kayla's restitution settlement. $7,000 covered Lorraine's delinquent taxes and medical balances. Over $40,000 went into LMW Holdings and then directly into escrow for a small office condo purchase. The rest went to legal fees, closing costs, and business setup expenses. Daniel had not known the full breakdown when he sent the money. But he had known enough to stop. He never did. When Elise read that summary aloud in her office, Daniel sat across from me looking like a man watching his own life translated into evidence. I didn't know about the condo, he said for the 10th time. Elise's voice stayed level. But you moved marital funds in secret to an entity you did not investigate. He nodded weakly. I didn't enjoy seeing him dismantled. That would have been easier in some ways. Cleaner. Instead, I kept catching flashes of the man I'd loved, the father who built blanket forts, the husband who used to leave gas in my car when he borrowed it, the person who once sat with me on a hospital floor after my miscarriage and said we would survive even if we had to redefine the word family. That's part of what makes betrayal so hard. It doesn't erase every good thing. It poisons them by association. The midpoint of the whole nightmare came from a banker named Mr. Everett who wore cufflinks shaped like tiny anchors and had the exhausted expression of a man who'd spent too much of his career watching families destroy themselves with paper trails. He confirmed something we hadn't known. Lorraine had not only formed LMW Holdings. She had applied for financing using projected support from family capital contributions, including an unsigned personal financial statement listing Daniel as an ongoing investor. My head snapped toward Daniel. You were an investor? No, his voice cracked. No, I never signed anything like that. Mr. Everett adjusted his glasses. The file contained documentation representing expected continued support. From where? Elise asked. He hesitated. There was mention of a possible home equity line to be pursued by Mr. Bennett if needed. The room went silent. I felt the blood leave my face. What home equity line? I asked. Daniel looked sick. There wasn't one. Mr. Everett glanced at the file again. A preliminary inquiry was made against the Alder Street property contract. I didn't understand at first. Then I did. Lorraine had been planning to leverage the house we never even got to buy, using our future home as collateral for her investment. Before we ever moved into it. I turned slowly toward Daniel. Did you know? No, he whispered. And I believed him. That was the shocking part. By then, I had gotten so used to not believing him that the truth felt almost offensive. Lorraine hadn't just manipulated his loyalty. She had built a structure around it. Used him as access. As cover. As emotional camouflage. That discovery changed the whole shape of the story. Not enough to save my marriage. But enough to show me that Daniel had become both accomplice and victim, the way people often do when raised inside certain kinds of family systems. He was guilty. He was also conditioned. Those two things can live in the same body without canceling each other out. Outside the bank, Daniel threw up in the parking lot. I stood by the curb while cars rolled past and June heat rose off the asphalt in shimmering waves. When he was done, he sat on the edge of the planter box and stared at the ground. She used me, he said. I folded my arms. She did. I thought if I helped enough, she'd stop making me feel like I owed her. There it was. the child under the grown man. The one who had spent decades earning love through rescue. She won't, I said. He looked up at me with eyes so wrecked I had to fight the instinct to comfort him. I know. That summer, we moved out of the rental and into a 2-bedroom apartment on the 3rd floor of a bland complex with a pool we never used and a hallway that always smelled faintly like somebody else's dinner. I got the apartment in my name. Daniel signed a temporary parenting schedule and rented a furnished room across town because Lorraine's house was too stressful, which was a sentence so pathetic I almost laughed. Sophie cried the first night in the apartment because the air conditioner rattled and the walls felt strange. I lay beside her on a mattress on the floor and told her we were not starting over from nothing. We were starting over from experience. What does that mean? She asked sleepily. It means now we know what matters. Do you know? Yes, I said, though I was still learning. Truth. Safety. Peace. Those are expensive, but not in the way people think. At work, I nearly fell apart. Not dramatically. Competently. Which is sometimes worse. I forgot to return a call from a parent whose son I'd been treating for 6 months. I showed up 10 minutes late to a care conference. I stood in the supply closet one afternoon staring at bins of therapy putty and adaptive scissors and suddenly couldn't remember why I'd walked in there. My supervisor, Jean, closed the door behind me. You need a day off, she said. I can't. That wasn't a question. I started crying before I could stop myself, hands pressed to my eyes in sheer embarrassment. Jean waited until I got it under control. You don't have to earn basic humanity here, Nora. That line undid me more than the crying had. I took the day. Not for a spa or a nap or anything glossy and healing. I spent it at a coin laundry with 3 weeks of linens, on hold with insurance, emailing school forms, and then sitting in the apartment parking lot eating drive-through fries while staring at a sky that looked insultingly normal. But by evening I could breathe again. Sometimes survival is embarrassingly plain. In July, Daniel asked if we could meet somewhere neutral to discuss more than logistics. We met at a park near the Scioto Mile while Sophie was with Tasha. He looked thinner. Less certain around the edges. Like confidence had drained out of him and left the structure standing by habit. I'm in therapy, he said after a minute. I nodded but didn't reward it. He gave a sad half-smile. You really don't owe me a gold star. No. He looked out at the river. I keep replaying it. Every time Mom cried. Every time she said I was all she had. Every time I thought being a good son meant protecting her from consequences. You were protecting yourself too, I said. He frowned. From what? From feeling like the bad guy. That sat between us. Finally he said, You're right. I studied him. Do you want me to tell you that because your mother manipulated you, what you did hurts less? No, he looked down. I want you to know I understand now that the secret mattered as much as the money. As much? He blew out a breath. More. I hadn't expected that answer. He swallowed hard. I broke the thing between us. The thing that made us us. And I kept waiting to talk my way back into being the version of myself I preferred. A gull screamed overhead. Somewhere behind us, kids laughed near the fountain. I said, That's the most honest thing you've said since this started. He nodded once. I know. The second major twist arrived in August, and it came from Lorraine herself. By then, Elise had pushed far enough into the financial records to force a settlement conference. Lorraine had retained counsel, which meant she finally understood this wasn't one of those family storms she could ride out by crying harder and accusing everyone else of disrespect. She also, apparently, decided to retaliate. One afternoon Daniel called me in a panic. Did you open a credit card in my name? I almost hung up from sheer disbelief. Are you insane? No, listen, there's a card and a personal loan inquiry and, his breathing sounded ragged. I got an alert that my credit score dropped 60 points. I went still. Did your mother have access to your information? Silence. Then, yes. How much access? A broken little laugh escaped him. Everything. My stomach turned. Within 48 hours we learned the truth. Lorraine had used Daniel's information, social security number, tax returns, employment details, to support multiple financing steps related to the condo business, including a business credit line and a personal guarantee draft. Some documents had been electronically initiated but not fully funded. The lender flagged discrepancies once the family dispute surfaced, and the whole file unraveled. Daniel wasn't just emotionally exploited. He was financially exposed. The same woman he had chosen over his wife had quietly tied his identity to her investment gamble without properly telling him. When he confronted Lorraine, she said, according to him, it was for the family anyway. That sentence nearly made me choke laughing when he repeated it, because of course that was her defense. In Lorraine's universe, family meant any sacrifice made by someone else in service of her fear. The failed financing triggered a review at Daniel's job because he held a position that required annual financial integrity disclosures. He hadn't stolen from the company, but undisclosed personal financial instability and inconsistent credit activity were enough to derail a promotion he'd been up for. Then his employer put him on a performance improvement plan after a shipping audit showed avoidable errors from months of distraction. Karma didn't arrive as lightning from the sky. It arrived as paperwork. Consequence. Credibility loss. The slow collapse of the image he'd curated as the dependable one. He called me one night and said, "Boys Hollow, I think I built my whole life around looking responsible instead of actually being accountable." I sat at my kitchen table while Sophie slept and let that sentence settle in the dark. "That's a painful realization," I said. "Do you hate me?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "But there were weeks when I wanted to. And there are still days when I don't know who I was married to." He cried quietly on the line. I let him. Not cruelly. Just honestly. Some grief can't be interrupted without becoming pity. The settlement conference happened in September in a downtown mediation office with fake orchids, bottled water, and the stale emotional atmosphere of a place where people come to divide lives into line items. Lorraine arrived in a dove-gray suit and looked offended by the existence of consequences. Kayla came too, pale and sober and clutching a legal pad she never wrote on. Daniel sat beside his attorney but kept glancing at me, then away, like even eye contact needed permission now. The basic terms on the table were ugly but straightforward: sale or transfer of the condo asset, restitution of misappropriated marital funds to the extent possible, division of remaining assets, parenting terms, and whether I would proceed with divorce on fault-based financial misconduct grounds or allow a less public no-fault resolution. What nobody expected was Lorraine trying to rewrite the story in the room. She started calm. Then self-righteous. Then wounded. "I raised my children to help each other," she said. "I did not force Daniel to do anything." Elise replied, "No one is alleging physical force." Lorraine ignored her. "Nora has always resented how close Daniel is to his family." I almost smiled. There it was again. Proximity as virtue. Enmeshment as loyalty. The mediator tried to redirect, but Lorraine wouldn't let go. She turned toward Daniel. "Tell them you chose to help me." He looked at her for a long second. "I did choose," he said. Relief flashed across her face. Then he continued. "I chose you over my wife and daughter because I was afraid of disappointing you." The room went still. Lorraine blinked. "Daniel. I chose not to verify anything because I've spent my whole life confusing guilt with duty." Her mouth parted. "I chose secrecy because you taught me honesty was betrayal if it made you uncomfortable." Even Kayla started crying. Lorraine's voice sharpened. "After everything I've done for you?" Daniel laughed once, and it was the saddest sound I'd heard from him in years. "That sentence is the whole problem." The mediator looked like he wanted to disappear into the ficus. Daniel kept going, and maybe he'd rehearsed it or maybe it had simply finally ripened in him, but every word landed exactly where it needed to. You lied to me about the taxes. You hid what you were doing with the condo. You used my information. And I let all of it happen because somewhere inside me I still believed being a good son meant setting my own family on fire if you were cold. Lorraine started to cry, real or fake, I no longer cared. Nora didn't ruin this, Daniel said, his voice breaking. I did. With help from you. But I did it. He turned toward me then. And I am sorry in a way that has no right to expect forgiveness. Nobody spoke. For the first time in months, I felt something unclench inside me. Not reconciliation. Not hope for us. Just relief. The truth had finally stood up in a room and used its full name. After that, the negotiation changed. Lorraine agreed to liquidate the condo interest. Kayla signed a statement acknowledging the restitution payments and her lack of knowledge about the source amount. Daniel agreed to a heavily lopsided asset division in my favor and to continue repaying the losses from his income over time. He didn't fight child support. He didn't fight the parenting plan. He didn't fight the divorce. He just stopped lying. That fall, Sophie turned 10. We held her birthday at Tasha's backyard because the apartment common room smelled like bleach and old carpet and because Tasha had fairy lights strung over her fence that made everything feel kinder than it was. Daniel came for the party. He brought a sketchbook set Sophie wanted and stayed mostly near the grill, careful, respectful, aware that his role in our lives had changed and might never return to what it was. At one point I found him sitting on the patio steps while Sophie showed him a comic strip she'd drawn about a raccoon attorney solving neighborhood mysteries. That's excellent cross-examination, he told her solemnly. She giggled. I watched them from the kitchen window and felt the old ache rise, grief not just for what he did, but for what he could have been if he'd grown up inside healthier love. Tasha touched my shoulder. You okay? Yeah, I said, then corrected myself. No. But I'm better than I was. That counts. By November, the divorce was final. People imagine finality feels like a gavel or a slam or some cinematic drop in the music. For me, it felt like signing my name on documents while a space heater clicked in the corner and a paralegal offered me a peppermint. Then walking outside into cold air and realizing nobody was going to tell me who I had to be next. Daniel stood across the parking lot when I came out. He didn't approach until I nodded. I'm not here to make this harder, he said. A sad little echo of one of his earliest texts. I wondered if he heard it too. I know. He looked thinner than ever, but clearer somehow. No more reflexive defensiveness. No performance. Just a tired man stripped down to what was true. I signed the transfer agreement, he said. The first reimbursement should clear this week. Okay. And I turned down Thanksgiving at my mom's. That surprised me. What are you doing instead? Taking Sophie to breakfast Friday if that still works for you. He paused. And probably eating frozen lasagna alone on Thursday. I almost smiled. He took a breath. I don't expect anything from you. I just wanted to say, thank you for not lying to Sophie about me. You could have made me into a monster. I looked at him carefully. You didn't need my help becoming one. He absorbed that, then nodded. Fair. After a second I added, but monsters don't usually go to therapy and admit who taught them how to betray people. So maybe you're not one. Maybe you're a man who waited too long to grow up. His eyes filled again, but he held it together. I'm trying, he said. I know. That was all. He left. The reimbursement money came in 2 waves. First from the forced sale of Lorraine's condo interest, which sold for less than she'd hoped and more than I wanted to care about. Then from Daniel's structured repayment. It didn't restore the lost house, the stress, the apartment year, the trust, or the look on Sophie's face in the title office. But it mattered. So did what happened next. Lorraine, unable to sustain the performance that she'd merely been misunderstood, tried for a while to turn extended family against me. She told cousins I'd overreacted, church friends that I'd taken legal advantage of a widow, neighbors that Daniel had been confused and under pressure. But facts have a mean streak when properly documented. Between the LLC records, the restitution trail, and the lending inquiry tied to Daniel's identity, her story frayed fast. People didn't necessarily shun her. Real life is messier than that. But they stopped automatically believing her. They stopped volunteering sympathy in bulk. The social power she'd wielded through emotional certainty began to shrink. Kayla, surprisingly, got sober in a steadier way than she ever had before. Not because the family saved her. Because the family stopped covering for her long enough that she finally saw the wreckage clearly. She started working at a florist in Westerville and sending small monthly repayments to Daniel, which he redirected into Sophie's education account without telling anyone but me. When I found out, I didn't know whether to be moved or angry or both. I settled on both. And me? I got the director position at the clinic in January. Jean called me into her office and said, "The board was impressed with how you handled an extreme personal crisis without ever compromising patient care." I almost laughed because I could think of at least 6 ways I had compromised something. Sleep. Skin. Sanity. My belief in permanence. But I took the position. More money. Better hours eventually. More responsibility. A chance to build the kind of workplace where nobody had to pretend they were machines. That spring, almost exactly a year after the closing disaster, Sophie and I went to see another townhouse. It wasn't the one on Alder Street. I was weirdly grateful for that. This one sat on a quieter block near Clintondale with a narrow garden strip out front and a kitchen that needed cabinet paint but had good bones. The upstairs bedroom facing east had morning light that washed the walls pale gold. Sophie stood in the doorway, older now in a way that had nothing to do with height, and asked, "Can we trust this one?" I knelt so we were eye level. "We can trust ourselves," I said. "That's better." She considered that, then nodded. "Okay. Then I like this one." We got it. Not because life suddenly became fair. Not because karma is a vending machine where you insert suffering and receive reward on schedule. We got it because I had rebuilt enough of my life, dollar by dollar and boundary by boundary, to choose again without lying to myself. The night we moved in, Sophie made another sign. This one didn't say "Welcome home." It said "We made it." I taped it to the fridge and cried where she could see me, because not all tears need hiding. A few weeks later, Daniel came by to drop off Sophie after dinner. He stood on the porch looking awkward in the dusk, hands in his jacket pockets. She ran inside to show him a school project she'd forgotten in the kitchen, leaving us alone for a moment. "This place suits you," he said. I glanced around at the porch light, the planters Tasha insisted on bringing over, the chipped step I kept meaning to have repaired. "It suits the version of me that learned something." He nodded slowly. "I'm glad." There was no flirtation in it. No hope. Just sincerity. "How's your mom?" I asked, surprising us both. He gave a tired half-shrug. Still convinced everyone betrayed her. Still lonely. Still unable to connect those two facts. I exhaled softly. "That sounds right." She asked if I thought you'd ever forgive her. And? I told her forgiveness and access are not the same thing. I looked at him fully then. That was wise. It took me 42 years. Some people never get there. He smiled, sad but genuine. I know. Sophie came running back with her project, and the moment ended exactly when it should have. That summer, at a family workshop event hosted by my clinic, I gave a short talk to parents about resilience in children. Not the polished, inspirational kind people post in neat fonts online. The real kind. The slow kind. I said resilience is not pretending pain didn't happen. It is letting children see what honest repair looks like. It is refusing to teach them that love means tolerating the intolerable. It is showing them, through exhausted adult choices and awkward brave conversations and rebuilt routines, that safety can be made again. Afterward, a woman in the audience with tired eyes and a wedding ring she kept twisting approached me. "How do you know all that?" she asked. I smiled a little. "Because I learned it the expensive way. On the first anniversary of the day we lost the Alder Street house, I expected sadness to flatten me. Instead, Sophie and I planted lavender in the front bed of our own place. Later, after she went to a friend's house, I sat alone on the porch with iced tea and let myself revisit the whole road from a distance. The closing room. The phone call. The drive home. The bag in Daniel's hands. The bank statements. The fake emergency. The hidden company. Kayla's confession. The lender file. The mediation room. The day truth finally stopped apologizing for itself. I used to think karma was dramatic, swift, visible. Now I think karma is often quieter than people want. It's not magic. It's the natural shape of consequences arriving one honest inch at a time. Daniel chose secrecy, and secrecy took his marriage. He chose guilt over discernment, and guilt handed his mother the keys to his life. Lorraine chose manipulation over dignity, and manipulation left her with the very thing she feared most, a house full of things and no real trust inside it. Kayla chose denial, and denial nearly cost her the rest of her son's childhood. And I, if I'm honest, chose for too long to call peace what was really avoidance. I saw hints of Daniel's enmeshment with Lorraine for years. The way he checked her moods before making plans. The way every holiday revolved around not upsetting her. The way my discomfort became a character flaw if it complicated her needs. I told myself it was manageable because love often convinces us that adaptation is maturity. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's surrender wearing nice shoes. The biggest lesson I carried out of that year wasn't that men can betray you or that mothers-in-law can be difficult or that money reveals character. All of that is true, but it's not the deepest truth. The deepest truth is this. Love without boundaries is not love. It's hunger. It's fear. It's old conditioning dressed up as loyalty. And if you don't name it in time, it will eat through every future you were saving for. One Sunday afternoon in September, Sophie and I were in the kitchen making blueberry muffins when she asked, out of nowhere, "Do you think Dad is happier now?" Kids ask the questions adults spend years avoiding. I stirred the batter and thought about it. "I think your dad is sad about a lot of things," I said. "But I also think he's more honest now. Sometimes that's the first step toward being happier." She nodded thoughtfully. "Do you think Grandma Lorraine is happy?" I smiled despite myself. "No, baby. I think Grandma Lorraine has spent a long time trying to win arguments with life instead of making peace with it." Sophie cracked an egg one-handed and grinned when she got it right. "I think I want to be the kind of person who just tells the truth," she said. I set down the spoon and kissed the top of her head. "That is an excellent ambition." Months later, near Christmas, Daniel dropped off a small envelope with Sophie's overnight bag. Inside was a copy of the first page of a letter from his therapist, not the private content, just a typed sentence he'd highlighted and written beneath. "This one hit me hard. I thought maybe someday it might matter to you that I finally understood it." The highlighted sentence read, "People raised to rescue emotionally immature parents often experience adult intimacy as a threat to their oldest loyalty." I stared at that line for a long time. Then I put the paper in a drawer. Not because it healed anything. Because I no longer needed to carry his self-awareness for him. That was its own kind of freedom. The following spring, Tasha and I sat on my porch while Sophie played hopscotch with two neighborhood girls and the lavender we'd planted the year before moved gently in the evening breeze. Tasha sipped her lemonade and said, "You know what's wild?" "What?" "If this had happened 3 years ago, you would have been more worried about appearing graceful than about protecting yourself." I laughed. "You're rude." "I'm accurate." I looked out at the sidewalk chalk, the half-open front windows, the life that had become mine not by accident but by insistence. You are, I admitted. She bumped my shoulder. Growth looks good on you. I smiled and didn't argue. Because she was right. Not about looking good. About growth. Growth was refusing to call betrayal misunderstanding. Growth was learning that being compassionate did not require being available for harm. Growth was knowing the difference between a man who made a devastating choice and a man I needed to keep rescuing from it. Growth was buying a house based on what I could afford alone. Growth was teaching my daughter that women do not stay small to keep other people comfortable. Growth was hearing the old panic knock and not opening the door. As for karma hitting hard? It did. But not in the gleeful, revenge movie way people sometimes hope for. Daniel didn't lose everything in a single spectacular collapse. He lost it in the order he had endangered it. First trust. Then home. Then reputation. Then the illusion that intention excuses impact. Lorraine didn't get dragged away in handcuffs or publicly humiliated in some grand cinematic scene. She got something more ordinary and, in its way, more devastating. She got seen clearly. For a woman who had built her life around controlling the narrative, clarity was a harsher punishment than scandal. And me? I lost the marriage I thought I had. Then I found the woman I should have been protecting all along. The last time Lorraine ever tried to reach out to me was through a handwritten note slipped into Sophie's backpack after one supervised holiday lunch. The note said, in careful blue ink, I hope someday you remember I only ever wanted to keep this family together. I stared at it for a long time. Then I turned it over and wrote my response on the back. Families don't stay together through secrets. They stay together through truth. I never sent it. I didn't need to. Some answers are only for the person who finally learned them. Years from now, Sophie may remember fragments more than chronology. A moving box. A title office. A casserole no one ate. An apartment.